Good morning. Today is Tuesday, June 6, 2023. Earlier in the Torah gave us the commandment, the prohibition, against Lashon Hara, speaking negatively about another person. We learned about this in the Parsha of Kedoshim a number of weeks ago. But in this week's Torah portion, the Parsha Ba'aloscha, at the very end of the Parsha, we have a narrative that doesn't just tell us it's wrong, but shows us how terrible it is and the terrible consequences that come from speaking Lashon Hara. And this occurs when Miriam speaks negatively about her brother Moshe. Vatadaber Miriam va'Aharon b'Moshe. Miriam and Aharon speak negatively about Moshe. It's a question in the text. It seems to imply Miriam and Aharon were speaking, but later it appears only it was Miriam that was speaking. That's a question that has to be dealt with separately. We'll leave that for now. And they were speaking about the woman that Moshe had married. So the Torah says that God came to the three of them, and God says, "Madua lo yiresin ledaber b'avdi b'Moshe." Why don't you have the proper respect against speaking about Moshe, my servant Moshe? Vayichar af Hashem bam, and God was angry with them. Vatisager Miriam michutz lamachaneh shivas yamim. Miriam was forced to leave the camp for 7 days, to be by herself. And then the movement of the Jewish people continued. Now, we've shared before that when it comes to negative speech, there are two categories. One is called motzi shemra. Motzi shemra means it's false to say something libelous about another person. That is always prohibited. Then there's another category called Lashon Hara, speaking negatively about another person when it is true. Saying something that is true but negative about another person is Lashon Hara. It's prohibited. In Lashon Hara, there are exceptions. We've discussed this many times before. If there is a necessary purpose to share the information, if there is a constructive need to share that information so that, let's say, someone else does not get harmed, then, of course, not only is it permitted, it's required to say something in a certain way. We've discussed those guidelines. But otherwise, if there's no constructive purpose, if it's not litoeles for a constructive purpose, it is prohibited, because the fact that it's true is not an excuse. And it's interesting that the Torah does not even tell us what Miriam said that was so bad. But if we look in Rashi, Rashi gives an idea of what it was that the discussion was. And it turns out it was a simple issue in Jewish law. That Miriam was questioning that Moshe and his wife had been living separately, presumably because of the fact that Moshe was a prophet and therefore needed to be at certain times separated from his wife in order to be able to speak directly to God. And Miriam and Aaron were also prophets. They did not stay apart from their spouses, so they wondered, why is it that Moshe has to stay apart to speak to Hashem, and we do not have to stay apart to speak to Hashem? Okay, it happens that there's a very good answer to that, because Moshe was on a level of prophecy much higher than theirs. But, they were discussing an issue of Jewish law. It's not necessarily negative. It's not necessarily criticizing Moshe. It was a discussion seeking to understand the difference in practice. How is that negative? How is it negative? We're talking about Jewish law. How is that negative? And what we're talking about is true. They didn't make anything up. Rabbi Shamshon Full Hirsch provides an answer. The answer is very simple, but it's hard to incorporate and practice in our daily lives. It was Lashon Hara because it wasn't their business. There's no toelis. There is no reason for me to think about or conjecture somebody else's wedding and marriage and their relationship with their spouse. It's not my business. Unless, of course, there would be some reason in which, in fact, it was. Obviously, if a couple comes to me and asks for help with their marriage, of course, the relationship between husband and wife becomes relevant. Of course, it's confidential, but it becomes relevant. But for two siblings to be talking about, even in discussing the halacha, it doesn't concern you. Don't get involved with it. That's Lashon Hara. Don't get involved in subjects that don't concern you. The Torah wants us to teach us specifically when you can rationalize. The Torah tells us this story because it would be so easy to rationalize. Miriam could say, well, what I said was the truth. Moshe and his wife are living separately. And I wasn't saying anything bad. I was just discussing halacha. The rationalizations are there. That's why the Torah wants to tell us the story. The rationalizations don't matter. It's prohibited because it's none of your business. It's not latoelis. None of your business. And that's the Lashon Hara. Doesn't matter how many excuses or rationalizations you may think you have. If it is true, if it is a matter of Jewish law, why should it be prohibited? Why, in fact, does God prohibit such a thing? We've discussed this before in the words of the Chinuch, Rabbi Aharon of Barcelona, because ultimately, God is more concerned that we don't cause each other pain than that at every moment we say what is absolutely true. Truth is subservient to peace. That's the ultimate fundamental principle. Yes, when it is latoeles, when not sharing a piece of information could harm somebody else, yes, then truth takes precedence. But up until that point, peace comes first. And this is a lesson that we have discussed many times, and we need to keep repeating it because we need to keep repeating it to get it, to absorb it and to remember it. We can cause so much pain with our words. Even, I would say, especially when we are rationalizing that we have a good reason to say something. But we can also cause such healing. We can bring so much hope and take away so much anguish and anxiety just with our words. I've shared with some of you before this story. I heard it from Rabbi Moshe Weinberger. And it concerns a very great rabbi in the early 1900s, Rabbi Elia Lopian, a great scholar and Torah leader. So Rabbi Elia Lopian was the head of a yeshiva, and he would go on trips to collect funds for his yeshiva. And one time he went to a town in England, and they told him in this town there's a gvir, there's a very, very, very wealthy man, and in this town, whenever anyone comes to collect, they go to see him, and he gives generously to every yeshiva. You have to see him. Just one particular thing you should know about this man. He himself is a Jewish person, but he is not observant. He does not follow Torah mitzvahs. He doesn't keep Shabbos. He doesn't keep kosher. But he gives tzedakah to every yeshiva generously, and you have to go see him. So Rabbi Elia said to the people of the community, he said, I don't want to see this person. I don't feel comfortable to take money to support a yeshiva that the person themselves doesn't try to live up to the standards of what we're teaching, and I will refuse to go see this person. That was his personal opinion. But the people of the town said to him, you can't do that. You can't do that, because this is a very wealthy man. He supports all the Jewish causes, all the yeshivos. If someone of your stature, Rabbi Elia Lopian was a great, well-known scholar, everyone knew that he was coming to town. If someone of your stature comes and doesn't go to see this well-known gvir, this well-known wealthy person, he's going to hear about it. He's going to be upset that you didn't come see him. And then maybe he's not going to give so generously to the other yeshivos. If you don't want to take the money for yourself, that's one thing. But why should you be able to harm the other's ability to collect funds from him? It's not right. So Rabbi Elia thought about it, and he decided on a compromise. He decided that out of respect for the tzedakah that this man had given, which of course was a great mitzvah, he would go to visit this wealthy man, but he would not receive any funds from him. Okay. So he comes in to visit this wealthy man, and they sit down to talk. And Rabbi Elia says to this man, "Excuse me, but I'd like to ask you a personal question, and please don't be offended. I'm really interested in understanding you better. Of course, I appreciate all of the generosity you show to every yeshiva that comes, every Jewish cause that comes. I appreciate it. It's a mitzvah. But please help me understand. How is it that you yourself are not personally observant? You don't keep Shabbos, you don't keep kosher, you don't learn Torah. And yet you support every Torah cause, you support every yeshiva generously. How? How does that happen?" So this wealthy man says to him, I've never told this story to anybody, but you asked, and I understand that you're an important scholar, and I'll tell you the story. This is what happened. When I was a boy, this man says, I was already off the path. I was rebelling against my parents, against Judaism, against God. And my father, when I was a boy, living in Europe, my father sent me to Radin to learn in the yeshiva of the Chafetz Chaim, Rabbi Yisrael Meir Kagan of Radin, the great Chafetz Chaim. So his father sent him to Radin to learn in the yeshiva. Now, this boy, meaning the wealthy man, telling the story of when he was a boy, said, I didn't want to go. I knew that I was not cut out for yeshiva, much less the yeshiva of the Chafetz Chaim. But my father said I had to go, so I went. I traveled by train to Radin. It was a long ride. And before you were accepted into the yeshiva, you needed to meet with the principal of the yeshiva for a test to see if you were deserving, to see if you were worthy to enter the yeshiva. I started to take this test, and the principal saw immediately that I was not cut out for the yeshiva, and the yeshiva was not out cut for me. And he told me I had to go. I was not admitted to the yeshiva. And this principal said to me, "You're not accepted." And the man says, I have to say I was relieved, because I didn't want to be there. I didn't want to be in this yeshiva. I knew that I was not cut out for it. The problem was, at the time that this happened, it was already late at night. And it was in the winter. It was freezing in Radin in Poland. And there were no trains at night leaving Radin. There would not be another train to get home until the next day, so I did not know what to do. What would I physically do? Where would I spend the night? So I didn't know what to do. I just started walking through the streets of this tiny town late at night. I didn't know anyone at Radin. No train till the next day. I had heard that there's a Chafetz Chaim. I heard the greatest scholar in the Jewish world at that time is living in Radin. So I figured, listen, he's the greatest scholar in the world. He's the leader. I'll knock on his door. Maybe he can give me some advice. Maybe he can give me some help. So this man, telling the story of himself as a boy, says, I went to his house. I knocked on the door. The Chafetz Chaim himself answered. He was an elderly man at this time. The Chafetz Chaim was very poor. He did not own 2 matching pieces of furniture. So I said to him, Rebbe, you don't know me. I just came today to Radin. I came to join the yeshiva, but I was not accepted. Can I at least stay in the dormitory overnight? There's a dormitory for boys from out of town. I have nowhere else to sleep. There's no trains to go home till tomorrow. It's cold. It's nighttime. Can I just spend the night in the dormitory and then I'll go home tomorrow? And the Chafetz Chaim said, No. If you're not accepted into the yeshiva, you may not spend the night in the yeshiva dormitory. So now I'm thinking to myself, this boy is saying to himself, I'm thinking to myself, this is the Chafetz Chaim. This is the one that we're all telling these stories about, the amazing compassion and kindness and greatness of the Chafetz Chaim. And there's a little boy who appears on his door with nowhere to sleep overnight. And no, he can't stay in the dormitory overnight to go home. So I said to him, he's saying as a boy, I said to the Chafetz Chaim, but Rebbe, what am I going to do? It's freezing outside. I have nowhere to go. I have nowhere to sleep. And the Chafetz Chaim said to me, he said, no, you misunderstood what I said. You cannot stay in the dormitory because you were not accepted to the yeshiva. But with your permission, I would love for you to stay here with me in my house tonight. So the boy thinks to himself, man, well, this is a strange day. First, I'm rejected by the yeshiva. Now I'm a guest of the Chafetz Chaim. The Chafetz Chaim gives the boy dinner. And he goes to bed. But this boy can't sleep. He's thinking about all that happened to him. And as he's lying there, trying to fall asleep, the Chafetz Chaim peeks in the door, thinking that the boy is sleeping. So the boy doesn't want to be caught. So he closes his eyes as if he is sleeping. He has no idea what the Chafetz Chaim is doing in his room. So the boy is pretending to be asleep. The Chafetz Chaim walks in and leans over him. And the Chafetz Chaim whispers to himself, Nebuch, I think my guest is cold. And the Chafetz Chaim takes off his jacket and puts it on top of the boy to keep him warm. And now, so many years later, this man says to Rabbi Elia Lopian, Rebbe, it's because of the whisper of the Chafetz Chaim that he put his coat over me, that I have any warm feeling today towards Judaism, towards those who study it and support it. And though I do not observe mitzvos myself, I support every yeshiva because of those whispered words of the Chavetz Chaim. Never forget the power of just a word to change someone's life and to melt even the hardest heart. My friends, I wish you a great day, and I look forward to seeing you soon in person.